Hi there, Isaac.
Hi, Arthur.
I am going to be sharing my screen probably around 2:30ish.
Alrighty. Everyone should have screen sharing enabled for them today. But I will. I've also made you co-host, so you
Oh,
can
okay.
put people's hands down or whatever if you need to.
Great. I'll figure out how to do that. Right. All right. Thanks a lot. I'll check in a few minutes.
Alrighty.
Hello?
Hello.
Right now I have my cooler on. It's pretty loud. Can you hear it?
No.
Okay. All right. So let's see. You probably sent an email with the agenda. I just got back from the Bochum building. It's looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Just a reminder, we're live streaming already, so
Okay. Well, so far I haven't said anything inappropriate. No, it's looking pretty good. And so now I'm looking for the agenda.
looking for what?
I have the agenda saved on my hard drive, so I'm going to pull it up.
Alrighty. Yeah, I mean, I didn't send a separate agenda other than you had me do that notice of filing.
Right.
And
Right.
I included, well, it was in the notice of filing, and then I also just included a separate PDF copy of the agenda with that email.
Yeah.
So that's the only time I sent that out.
Okay.
I'm also going to send you an updated list of
Oh,
participants. There are a couple last minute signups this morning, so it's not much different, but there are just a couple new folks at the bottom.
oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
Hi there, Judith.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well. So you decided to show your face this time.
Well, at least when I'm talking. So,
Okay, well, I'll be waiting in the wings.
yeah. I have my cooler on and I asked Isaac if he could hear it and he said no, so I guess that's good because
Yeah,
it's pretty loud to me, but we'll see.
I just turned mine off because it was blowing straight down on my back, so I can live without that for a while.
Well,
Zoom does a pretty good job of filtering out white noise like that in the background.
really, that's good to know because I was in another meeting and I turned it off and this room has southwest facing, so it can get hot in the afternoon.
Right, okay. T minus 4. We'll see how many people show up.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're here for the IRP workshop. NMPRC docket number 21-00128 UT. It is now 2:01, and I see that we have Commissioner Fishman and Commissioner Maestas present. Are there any other commissioners present? No, but I think Commissioner Hall will be joining us. My name is Judith Amer. I'm an Associate General Counsel in the Office of General Counsel at the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. I have been designated the presiding officer over this workshop. And last Friday, we issued an agenda, and can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, because I received a message from Commissioner Fishman that he could not hear me. And I can't hear him, but that's
I
because
think
he's
I
on.
fixed it. It was my
Okay.
end.
All right, great. So as I was saying, we issued an agenda and a handout that Art O'Donnell was going to go through. But the first thing on the agenda was going to be a welcome and the context of the rulemaking by either Commissioners Fishman or Hall. And so Commissioners Fishman and Hall, you can take it over from here to give the welcome and the context of the rulemaking.
Okay, Steve, what do you want to do? Shall I go and then you?
Yeah, go ahead. Take the lead.
Okay, great. First of all, I want to thank everyone for attending. This is a rulemaking that a number of us have worked on for quite some time. We consider it a work in progress, of course. I mean, we've got it to a state we want to bring to people, but we look forward to hearing what everybody has to say about how this rule can be improved and how we can go forward with it. What I'd like to talk about a little bit is the context. When I say we've worked on it for some time, I'm thinking really of the first iteration of a procurement rule that we worked on some years ago for several years. And that one bit the dust in the commission just a week before the hearing was to start. And, you know, at the time I was pretty disappointed about it, but I think in retrospect, it was maybe a gift in disguise, because in the interim between then and now, we've had a number of very important things occur. One is that the Energy Transition Act was passed. And the court case associated with it before the Supreme Court was decided. And then the replacement resources case was concluded, having to do with the Palo Verde, or the San Juan generating station in northern New Mexico. And those things gave us some directive. All of those events, they gave us some guardrails and some food for thought in what this rule might look like. And it also gave us time to think about where does procurement really make sense? And increasingly, as we observed and continue to observe how the energy market is transforming with new technologies, we begin to see that timeframes need to be shortened in terms of analyzing the value of planning processes. And we concluded that the integrated resource plan process was a good place to put procurement, because there's a natural flow from planning to procurement. And it was also an opportunity to revisit the length of the IRP planning timeframe so that we can adjust to the need to be able to have a review of how successful technologies and approaches are being in a time frame that then can be responded to and allow companies to pivot in. So there were a number of reasons why it made sense to structure this way, we felt, and we're hopeful to get feedback from everybody here and beyond. If you know people who might be interested, please invite them to participate, because another thing that has evolved from the plethora of rulemakings that we have before us is our affection for the workshop process. We're finding it's very helpful. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's time consuming, but we believe that it's, or at least I believe, and I believe our team believes, that it's a very worthwhile process. So we look forward to going through this process with you, and we believe we'll be aided in this effort in developing a rule in a very meaningful way by everybody who's here. So I just want to welcome you and thank you for devoting your precious time to this effort. And we appreciate hearing your thoughts and really seek to collaborate with you to find the best solutions to go forward in New Mexico. Thanks so much.
And I'll add a couple of comments. I think everybody on here has heard the commission complain about last minute rush decisions, expedited decisions, last minute stuff that makes it difficult for the commission to do its job of balancing all the interests and being sure it's got all the evidence in front of it. And essentially, what I think one of the huge benefits of what we're trying to put forward here is that it pushes up some of the important planning activities earlier. So the commission knows what's coming, why it's coming. And it has an additional advantage that once it gets to a proposal, whether it's for an ESA or a PPA or a CCN, that a lot of the work has already been done. You're not facing challenges about whether it's the right resource or the wrong resource. And if it's the wrong resource, then having to scramble to try and fill a hole in capacity. And the process that we're proposing, the whole intent of it, whatever its flaws might be, and I'm sure there are plenty that we need to iron out, is to essentially create that more structured planning environment to avoid the rushes, to avoid the surprises, to avoid the consequences of last minute decisions that, oh, this resource might not work. We've done that work up front. And for me, that's one of the primary benefits. I think there's a lot more involved as well in terms of coordinating assets and so forth. But if we do this right, I think we can reach a balance that frankly saves everybody work and avoids the emergencies. So I'll leave it at that. And Judy, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioners Fishman and Hall. Next on the agenda is Art O'Donnell is going to present an overview of the changes to the IRP rule that we're looking to make. And we sent out the major changes document, and I don't know if it's going to be on the screen share, but it was served on everyone who was on the certificate of service. So with that, I'll let Art take over.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Commissioner Fishman and Commissioner Hall. For those of you who do not know me, I am a Department of Energy fellow who's started working with the Public Regulation Commission back in December of last year, in particular to help the commission figure out how to move down a path towards modernizing the grid and better integration of renewable resources. And so I have been working with the commissioner offices on a number of issues, including a prospective rulemaking on updating the interconnection rule and manual, which is ongoing with quite a lot of participation from utilities and industry representatives and members of academia here in New Mexico to try and bring those rules up to date and to be able to accommodate an influx of distributed generation. Also, I've begun working with Commissioner Maestas' office on implementation of the Community Solar Act after the passage of HB 84 earlier this year. And just to remind people that there's going to be another workshop this week on Thursday, an all-day workshop beginning at 9 a.m. to go over the policy issues that the Commission is facing for Community Solar Act implementation. In this case, we're updating an existing rule and appending what had been a prospective rule that the Commission started kicking around a couple of years ago and really was not able to complete. So I'm going to be showing some slides and talking through them. This slide deck is derived from the document that was sent out with the agenda. It's not exactly the same, and my script is a little bit different in that I'll be talking from a more of a narrative approach of a straw proposal for revising the IRP and procurement process. So after I go through the slides, then I'll take some clarifying questions, but I'd really rather that we waited until the questions, concerns, and comments period after the presentations on what the major changes are that we're looking at, and also walking you through kind of what the rule looks like under our revisions so that you know where to look for things, because not only did we make word changes, we also moved a lot of furniture around. So maybe it'll help you to understand kind of like how all the changes fit together. And Colin Gillespie will be following me in terms of presenting that portion of the show. So this is what we're talking about here, the IRP and Resource Procurement Framework, Title 17, Chapter 7, Part 3, which is all the statutory underpinning for integrated resource plans and RFP process for electric utilities as they are in the New Mexico PRC rules. Our goals for the rule revision are really to increase transparency, to provide an early stakeholder influence in the planning and procurement process, and to ensure that updated state policies and all appropriate technologies are properly considered. It promises to transform the current public input process and addresses a spate of what are considered poorly designed and problematic RFPs that have been brought to the Commission in recent years. Now, you may have a different opinion about that, but certainly the Commission, as Commissioner Fisherman has pointed out, has struggled with some of the RFP results, and in particular the resource replacement for San Juan led to a lot of adjudication and a contested outcome. And we want to avoid that going forward. So this is really an attempt to do that. All right. Also, the goals are for unifying planning and procurement with specified start dates, filing dates that put the Commission in a proactive position so that it can better protect the public interest. Right. The increased level of upfront stakeholder and commissioner involvement substantially can reduce the likelihood of denial for a CCN, a PPA, or an ESA filing. That is the hope, in order to give more certainty to everyone. Okay. We have a number of slides that talk about the major proposed changes, but I want to kind of give a narrative around this. And really what we're talking about is instead of a formal adjudicatory process for litigating utility IRP forecasted inputs and assumptions, this proposal instead establishes a commission-facilitated process for utilities and stakeholders to vet and reach potential agreement on a proposed statement of need for new or additional resources, if any are determined to be needed in the planning period, and an action plan. The statement of need is based on load forecasts, existing resource retirements, and other factors that are specified in Appendix A section of the rule. And as you look at that, which went out with the agenda, you'll see that all of those requirements for reporting on the existing state of the utility system remain in place with a couple of additions, and we'll talk about some of those. Participating stakeholders would be allowed access to utility models and assumptions subject to non-disclosure agreements, and may, in the course of the process, propose reasonable alternatives to the utilities analysis and forecasts. The results of forecasts in the form of tables, charts, and data would comprise appendices to a proposed statement of need and action plan that would become the main body of the filed IRP. So we're reversing the order of things a little bit in that what the commission is mostly concerned with are the outputs of the analysis and the stakeholder process described in terms of what the utility sees its needs will be in the coming 4-year period and what their plan is to approve that, to try and do away with the fighting over input assumptions, load forecasts, where to look for the projections of what that utility need should be. And we sincerely hope that the parties can work together in order to kind of reach agreement on those things before the statement of need and action plan are filed with the commission. Okay. Projections of resource costs based on most current market information and any projections of needed transmission, distribution upgrades associated with the resource needs should also be included in this appendix data. As you'll see later on, we're really hoping that the utilities begin to take into consideration the costs of upgrading their distribution and/or transmission systems in order to accommodate any bids that look to be accepted in the procurement process, so that we have a better sense of the total resource cost to New Mexico ratepayers. Okay. The major changes that you can see in the rule are that we're now citing recently approved legislation as the framework for outcomes: the Energy Transition Act, the Renewable Energy Act, the Grid Modernization Act, and now, most recently, the Community Solar Act. This, as I said, directly ties IRP outcomes to the procurement process, and it puts cost effectiveness analysis in the context of policy imperatives that come from that legislation, as well as new technology choices. It articulates clear policy directives and priorities for new resources. At the top level, reducing greenhouse gas emissions per the ETA, fostering clean energy development, and encouraging grid modernization. And all of those things have firm directives from the legislature for the commission to put into action. Drilling down a little bit, what this means is that the commission will be hoping that the utilities and the stakeholders provide priority to distributed energy resources, to demand response, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and flexible generation, including low emission fueled resources, energy storage systems, and transmission and distribution grid improvements. So it's not just looking for the next natural gas fired peaking plant. It's really trying to get a sense of the entire menu of technology options that are available in order to meet what is a very different kind of need than has been expressed in the past. Okay. This would replace a less effective year-long public input process with a 6-month commission-facilitated stakeholder process to reach agreement on those inputs and assumptions and propose a consensus statement of need and action plan prior to the filing with the commission. The final proposal to the PRC may include areas of agreement and unresolved issues for the commission to determine. If consensus is determined not likely by the facilitator, maybe 3, 4 months, 2 months into the process, then this would just go to adjudication proceedings and the utility would file its plan and we would go into a more contested approach, which we hope to avoid. Okay. These changes emphasize input from stakeholders and interveners in these ways. It provides access to utility models, and the commission already has precedent for doing so. It encourages alternative portfolio proposals, and the commission has precedent to do so. It provides the opportunity to review shortlisted bids without having to go through a formalized decision-making process, so that the commission and the parties can assure that what comes out of this process reflects what goes into the process. Changes to the PRC focus from reviewing the IRP inputs, whether they're load forecasts or the requirements that now exist in a section of the rule, and approving the IRP, changes to more of an emphasis on approving the outputs of the IRP analysis. As I mentioned, a statement of need, an action plan and alternatives that define all source RFP solicitations, review of those RFP solicitations for conformance with need determination based on intervenor review and PRC guidance, and approval of contracts that come from the RFP using the existing processes for certificates of convenience and need or approving public power agreements. Okay. This is a new concept, a statement of need, but the action plan is already built into the rules, right? So just so that you understand is that the statement of need is something that is expressed in terms of resources that meet the principles expressed in the IRP rule, but not specifically in terms of a generation technology or projects. That is, they meet the requirements of statute as we've listed them, ETA, Renewable Energy Act, Community Solar Act, etc. The utilities prioritize those projects and bids that best comply with the state requirements for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, fostering clean energy, and grid modernization. And in considering its proposed resources, the utilities should be prioritizing that whole list of new technology options. A most cost-effective portfolio of resources should be derived from this analysis, but cost effectiveness is seen in the context of the policy requirements that we all face now. The statement of need may be defined in terms of meeting net capacity, of providing reliability reserves, of securing flexible and or demand side resources, securing renewable energy, securing energy storage as required to comply with resource requirements established by statute or commission decisions. So that's a different way of looking at how you define and meet the resource need. The action plan, we didn't change this, but this is really the proposed process and specific actions the utility proposes to undertake to implement the integrated resource plan spanning a 4-year period following approval. Now that 4-year period is really part of a 10-year looking forward assessment. And one of the changes is that we're changing the planning horizon from 20 years to 10 years, but the action plan is envisioned for a 4-year period. It could be a 3-year period, all right? We're open to suggestions on what is the most beneficial about that. These are some of the other changes, right? Special attention to existing generation retirements and abandonments as the driver of new resource needs. We're seeing out of the 2020 census that New Mexico's actual population growth and therefore expected demand growth for electricity is lower than it's been in decades. This changes the way we look at growth. Growth is driven by relocations within the state. It's driven by the retirement of long-term traditional resources, whether they're coal plants or natural gas plants that have exceeded their life expectancy or are no longer competitive in the marketplace. Resource descriptions should include existing distribution transmission facilities and any approved or planned upgrades in the planning horizon, just so that the commission has a sense of how the system is changing. Also, it adds consideration of cost impacts of distribution and transmission upgrades in assessing new resource portfolio options. Some other things are that the utilities will maintain a rebuttable presumption of reasonableness for resource acquisitions that conform with the analysis and PRC approval. It would revise the focus of forecast analysis from being based on coincident peak demand to net reserve capacity and energy requirements. As in California and other states that have increasing amounts of renewable energy that are necessary to meet policy imperatives, the definition of need has changed a lot to what is a net capacity need. What is the difference between load and your existing base, which is now comprised of renewable resources, variable as they may be, in order to meet that load? It's very different from the old days of base load, intermediate load, and peak load. And we'd really like to see New Mexico get ahead of that change. And hopefully it will better incorporate the impacts of distribution energy resources on load forecasting. So one of the important issues is that, we're asking the utilities to look at their load forecasts in different ways. There is a possibility of the use of independent evaluator or a monitor, as considered by the commission, if necessary, to ascertain conformance with RFP documents and solicitation outcomes with PRC determinations. So we'll be looking to hear people's recommendations on the use of an independent evaluator. There are certain parties that see that an IE is really essential to this process in order to make sure that the utilities are performing as expected. But we're open to the comments and proposals for parties on this. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process timeline, but in a little bit more detail than in the slide that you're looking here. We're envisioning that this starts essentially with a notice of intention by the utility and a gathering together of the stakeholders that can participate in a facilitated process. No later than 6 months after this process begins, the IRP result coming from it, consisting of the proposed agreement plus a detailed listing of any unresolved issues, would be filed with the commission as an application for an expedited process to approve or modify and approve the statement of need and the action plan. Again, the commission is not approving the IRP plan per se. It's approving the outcome from that planning. The commission may call for hearings or briefings on contested issues, leading to a decision that directs the utility to implement the action plan as modified if necessary. Only under extreme disagreement can we envision the commission actually having to decide on disputes about the input assumptions. We really hope that that can be worked out in the stakeholder process. It would incur substantive delay to the consideration of proposals. Otherwise, the determination of a statement of need and action plan would be the major focus of the commission's order. Okay? The statement of need and action plan need to be approved before the utility begins any resource solicitation. And so we're looking at a 6-month period before the filing. Once the application is filed, the PRC clock starts, and we hope that a decision process can be completed within 4 months, right? If there are no contested issues, then it could be done faster than that. And that, of course, is the hope. That decision would lead directly to an all-source solicitation via request for proposals. But the utility needs to determine what its documentation and what those RFP documents look like, whether it's with draft contracts or the bidding protocol and a timeline for soliciting, accepting, evaluating, and ranking bids, and come back to the commission. Parties will have 21 days to provide comments as to the consistency of these documents in the RFP with the approved action plan. Then, 15 days following the comment period, the commission may authorize issuance of the RFP in order for the utility to go to market. Upon final acceptance, the utility may commence the solicitation according to the accepted timeline. We have a fairly quick turnaround for accepting bids, and we're open to your comments and feelings about whether this is realistic or whether it takes longer to get a reasonable set of bids for shortlisting. Right now, we're projecting 45 days after receiving the bids, right? There is no specified timeline for conducting the market process, but then the utility would come and provide a ranking of its project proposals that meet the stated criteria, a detailed description of price and non-price criteria for selection of a proposed shortlist, and a preferred portfolio of resources, plus any alternative portfolio that may also meet the identified needs within the planning period, along with timeline for resource development. This portfolio must meet cost-effectiveness standards while matching policy objectives. Again, interveners and stakeholders would have an opportunity to propose alternative portfolios as long as they meet the same criteria. But again, if there is participation all along, we hope that the differences of opinion will really be minor and really will be determined by the commission based on what is the best portfolio that meets the criteria and is most cost-effective within that criteria. The commission would decide on a final portfolio. The utility will apply for the necessary certificates of convenience and necessity or the approval of the PPA. We see that in a fairly expedited program. And the hope is that this process timeline really takes just 18 months, including the stakeholder process, right? But outside of that, it's really a year from filing to approval of the portfolio, and then whatever processes are necessary. Compare that with the current process, in which there's a year of public input. And looking at the latest IRP that we got, the outcome of that public input essentially boiled down to citizens had a lot of good ideas that we just can't implement at this time. It's not a valuable use of the resource and the time necessary. We have comments in 20 days, a utility response in 40 days after filing, a staff compliance review in 60 days that actually kind of overlaps with those other days. But then it goes into a commission approval process. If the commission takes no action, the IRP is approved in 90 days. But if it's contested, as we've seen in the past, the process could go on to infinity and no decision made. We're really looking for more certainty, and the existing process has no link to procurement. And that has been identified as a failing in multiple jurisdictions around the country, in that the planning process is utterly divorced from the actual resources that the utilities bring back to the commission. And this is our hope, that we can end that and make all of these aspects more meaningful. So that's my presentation. I'll take clarifying questions at this point, but I really can't go into kind of like exactly explaining where all this came from, because we're going to have a second workshop that's going to kind of review your comments and review alternative proposals and alternative language. So I can't really see what's going on there, but if someone has a clarifying question, I'm happy to take it right now.
Right now, I don't see anyone raising their hand. And perhaps we'll leave the questions for the end where it is on the agenda, which is at 3:20. apparently we're a little ahead of schedule, which is always nice. And next on the agenda will be a structural overview of the draft rule presented by Assistants Colin Gillespie, Assistant to Commissioner Hall, and Robert London, Assistant to Commissioner Fishman. They will describe where the functional parts of the draft rule are located in relation to the current, also known as old IRP rule. And with that, I will hand it over to Colin and Robert.
Thanks, Judy. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So for those of you that don't know me, I joined the commission right out of law school. I also have a background in business, specifically finance and economics, and I've been working closely with Commissioner Hall, as well as Arthur and other members of the team, such as Robert, on developing this rule. And we've spent significant amount of time on the rule, going through various iterations. And I'm going to get into the structural differences of the old rule versus the new rule now. So let me see if I can share my screen.
Colin, you could raise your voice a little bit for me. I'd appreciate it. Probably
Okay,
everybody
Commissioner.
else can hear you, but, oh, that's better. Okay.
Okay, maybe I just need to put the mic closer to my face there.
Yeah.
Okay. So first, I want to start off with the objective. And this is getting to what Arthur was discussing in terms of getting away from cost as the sole criterion for resource portfolio plans. So we really want to emphasize that portfolios should comply with the state's requirements for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, moving towards clean energy development and grid modernization. And as Arthur mentioned, this would be pursuant to the REA, specifically the ETA and other bills such as the Community Solar Act. We'd also like to see an emphasis on, or a priority, on distributed energy resources, demand response, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and flexible generation. So whereas the old rule was basically paragraph A, we've now added paragraphs B and C. Also, we've had to update several definitions in the proposed rule. These include things like an action plan and the statement of need. Those are completely new sections that needed new definitions because they did not exist in the current or previous rule. We've also included, updated or new definitions for demand response, demand side management, derating, distributed energy resource, energy storage resource, flexibility, flexible generation. We've updated the integrated resource plan definition slightly. And we've also introduced the concept of net capacity, which Arthur was alluding to earlier. We want to introduce the concept of net capacity as a supplement to the sole criterion of a peak load. We also have definitions for net load, optimization. We've updated the planning period definition slightly, the definition of refurbish, regional energy market, and renewable energy. So one of the major changes that you'll see is that the former or current rule for integrated resource plans, it's a long list of contents that need to be in the initial filing. So it starts at section 17739 in the old rule, and it goes on for several pages, and it's just a very long laundry list of everything that needs to be in the rule. For legibility and to streamline the rule, what we've done is we've turned this into section 17738, and we've discussed what needs to be in the IRP, but instead of breaking down everything in one section, we've created an appendix, which I'll show at the end of these slides. So most of these are going to be the same. You'll see a lot of transferability. So description of existing resources, those will stay the same. Current load forecasts, pretty much everything that's in there will transfer over to the proposed rule. But the descriptions are just located at the end in a separate appendix. Now, one of the major changes is really beefing up the public advisory process. So per statute, we do have authority to have a public advisory process. However, in the previous rule, this was in section 17.7 3.9 as one of those laundry list items. It's a very small section, just 2 paragraphs. And what we've tried to do is make a more robust public input process. So we've created the facilitated stakeholder process. And this is what Arthur was talking about. This occurs prior to several approvals and to the RFP issuance and bid solicitations. So as Arthur was mentioning, initially the utilities will file notice of intention, okay? And this will allow interested stakeholders or interveners to join in the facilitated stakeholder process. So this is now 17.739, whereas in the old rule, 17.739 was pretty much everything that needed to be included in the IRP. Additionally, we have several entirely new sections here. So we have the statement of need. This addresses the amount and types of new resources, and it supplements the concept of peak load with other criteria to comport with statutes and commission decisions. Next, we have the action plan. And the action plan really flows from the statement of need. It details how the utility plans to implement the IRP over that 4-year period. As Arthur mentioned, we're open to making this a 3-year period. It really depends on what we receive in terms of feedback, comments in the docket, and how the next workshop goes as well. But here we're talking about specific steps that the utility proposes to procure new resources to meet its stated need from section 17.7.3.10. So this would occur prior to the issuance of requests for proposals, and it would include a status report of the actions contained in the previous action plan. That would be the previous iteration of an IRP filing. That's not much of a change from the previous rule. The previous rule also contained an obligation to report on any substantive changes of planning. Following the action plan, we have a new section. It's the request for proposal process. This follows the action plan chronologically and in the document itself. It includes increased transparency measures, but it also includes confidentiality protections. And it allows for input on alternative portfolios. Then we have a cost recovery section, and something new that we've included is a rebuttable presumption that evidence in support of the resource portfolio's consistency with the commissioner-approved statement of need constitutes prima facie evidence that the resource type is required by public convenience and necessity. That would be a rebuttable presumption, but nonetheless, that would be a presumption for the utilities. And then also, as Arthur mentioned, we have the independent evaluator section. That we can see several points, at least 2 points in the process where an independent evaluator may be necessary. But we really would like some feedback on that. I know that it was a very contentious part of a previous rulemaking in 2018. But that concludes the slides. And I'm going to pull up both the old document and the new document very briefly, just for those of you who haven't seen them, to go through the changes. And let's see. Okay. I think everyone should be able to see both of these documents now. On the right, we have the proposed rule. Okay, and on the left, we have the current rule. And I'll just scroll up to the beginning here. Here we can see that the objective section is slightly more robust, and it includes those other criteria in addition to most cost-effective portfolio. We recognize that, of course, cost is still going to be a major consideration in planning and procurement. And then I think we can go ahead and scroll past the definitions here. Here on the left, this is where the giant section on the contents of the IRP begins. And you can see that it goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4 pages or so. On the right, it gets trimmed down to half a page, but all of the components have corresponding appendices at the end of the document, okay? So that's gonna be, whoops, just before the certificate of service, my mistake. Right here, this is Appendix A, and it includes pretty much everything that was in that long list, but this seems like a much more legible, easy to follow version of the rule instead of just throwing everything into one section. Again, this obligation to notify of material changes and update action plan, that still exists in the new rule. It's just located in a different section. And we also still retain confidentiality protections. And commission review, acceptance, and action, that's going to be that's going to actually be in the appendix at the very end. So we have loads and resources, identification of resource options,
Hey,
determination.
Colin,
Yes.
this is Robert Lundeen.
Hi, Robert.
I believe, so just to talk on that, the commission review, acceptance, and action section was kind of rendered obsolete. So it's something that was removed from the proposed rule because throughout the process that we created with the new IRP rule, it kind of renders a review and acceptance and action section, a standalone section, kind of obsolete. So.
Okay, that's my mistake, everyone. Sorry about that. And thank you, Robert, for the correction. But those are the major changes for the proposed rule. And again, I want to reiterate what Commissioner Fishman and Commissioner Hall stated, that this is far from perfect right now, but we have spent a lot of time and went through many iterations of this document and many different, let's say, functional strategies for the proposed rule. And the more feedback and comments that we can get from everyone in this workshop, the better the final rule is going to turn out. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Judy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Robert wanted to add anything else. Would you like to, Robert?
I don't have anything else substantive to add, but I'll just give a quick introduction since Colin did. Most of you know me by now, formerly with the Attorney General's office, but as of April, I moved over to the PRC, now working with Commissioner Fishman as his executive assistant. And yeah, so sorry.
Okay. Well, at this point, it calls for a break, and we can either take the break or we could keep going depending on what Commissioners Hall and Fishman would like to do. Well,
Ms. Amer?
yes.
This is Leslie Padilla from PNM. I have a question of Mr. Gillespie, if that's possible.
Yes. So maybe we won't take a break and we'll go right into questions, concerns, and comments. And so Leslie Padilla from PNM is the first person that has a question. Go right ahead. Leslie?
Thank you. And I will have some prepared comments and more general comments later, but I did just have one specific question for Mr. Gillespie, following up on his explanation of the proposed rule. And that goes to the IRP requirements that would now be in Appendix A. Is the list of requirements that would be in Appendix A, is it, excuse me, the same as the requirements in the current IRP rule, or are there new requirements that will be proposed that a utility must include in its IRP?
So it is going to be largely the same. However, there are also going to be additional requirements, and there are going to be sort of more fleshed out or more robust specific examples. So we really try to drill down and create specific actionable things that can be included. And then along with grid modernization and more renewable energy, we definitely had to add more language to that effect in that appendix. And I'll also open it up for Robert or Arthur for any specific additions to that effect. But thank you for the question very much.
Yeah, Leslie, this is Arthur, and I referenced one of the changes that you'll see in there in the description of existing resources is to include existing distribution and transmission facilities and approved changes or planned upgrades within the planning horizon. Right, the commission really doesn't have any other place where it can get that information, and so this was an addition that was made. In the discussion that's in the requirement for evaluating bids, there's a new section on describing non-cost criteria. And it should be no surprise that the non-cost criteria are really, how does this meet the policy prescriptions that we have to face? But there are some new elements in there that didn't previously exist, to try and move away from solely a cost-based analysis of resources to what the resources can really bring to the need, right? So those would be two major examples, and I'm sorry that we didn't kind of yellow line everything for you, but I think in the document that went out with the change, we tried to highlight as many of those as possible, and I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Ms. Padilla, do you have a follow-up question?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so I guess at this point, Commissioner Hall and Fishman, would you like to take a break or would you like to keep going?
Judy, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to do what other people want to do. I was just searching around trying to find my agenda and I can't find it. So I don't know how far through the agenda we are.
Well, right now we're at where we were supposed to be, like at 3:50, basically taking comments and questions and statements from the participants.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I would recommend a 5-minute break just so that people can get some water and formulate their questions and then come back. We really are about a half an hour ahead of the schedule.
Yeah. And then then I will just take the comments and questions in order of the sign up sheet. So I think that's fairly random, but the sign up sheet was prepared. List of participants was prepared by Isaac. So I'll take it in that order.
Sounds good.
All right.
Hey, Judy,
Great job,
Yes.
guys.
So return to 3.
Nancy wants something.
Someone,
Nancy
Yeah.
is.
Nancy, can,
yes.
okay. I just have sometimes problems with my computer, so I guess we'll take a break.
Yes, we'll take a 5-minute break and come back, and I'll take we'll take comments, questions from the participants in order as you're listed on the list of participants, which is a fairly random order. Okay, see you at 3. Bye.
Hi.
Judith, this is Arthur. I just wanted to remind everyone that the materials that we're using will appear in the docket, in the e-docket for this proceeding, the 21-00128, so that people have access to the slides, to the straw proposal, to the major revisions change, and to the revised rule and Collins slides. So all of that will be posted. Hopefully it'll all be up there this afternoon, so you have it. I'd also point out that courtesy of Commissioner Byrd's recent order, there will be a second workshop and a date for filing formal comments, post-workshop comments, and additional comments on the proposal. And I believe, you can correct me, that the date for the new filings would be July 15th and the date for the next workshop would be July 22nd.
That's all correct. And Art, the only thing that is not in the docket now are the slides that Colin presented. The other items, your statement and the agenda were filed as part of the notice of filing that we did on Friday.
Okay, I'll just make sure that that what I used today is up there because I had a separate document that was in narrative form that went along with the slides.
Okay.
People take information differently, right? And you know, I'll just point out that we have several comments that came out of the initial order. Utilities don't need to repeat that, but they may supplement them.
Yes, that's a good thing to say because yeah, they don't need to repeat, but I'm sure there's new information that has come to people's attention after having the workshop, this first one. And we might be ready to start fairly soon.
Judy, are we just waiting for people to ask questions? No?
No, I'm just looking for my sign up sheet and I know that Isaac sent it to me, an updated recent one. So I just have to find that. Okay, I found it. And the first person on the sign up list is Jim Desjardins of REIA. Is Jim here and would he like to comment?
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, I didn't really have any comments prepared, and quite frankly, I forgot that I signed up to comment. But I just want to say real quickly that I'm really glad that the commission is considering distributed energy resources in this docket, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes together. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Next, we have Kelly Gould and Peter Gould from the Gould Law Firm. I am not sure which one is, or both are present, but which one would like to speak at this time? I see Peter Gould, and could you unmute yourself, Peter? Well,
We'll come back to Peter.
we will come back to Peter, right?
Judy,
Next, yes?
Yeah, we might have a problem just because we're so ahead of schedule. You know, folks might be expecting to ask questions around 4 and it's around 3. We got through that pretty quickly. Yeah.
But it'll all come together, I'm sure. If he comes back, we'll come back to him. Next on the sign-up list for Colin and Arthur. So we've already heard from them, and we'll after that is Greg Patterson from the New Mexico Independent Power Producers. Is Greg Patterson available? Okay, do not see Greg. Zoe Lees from SPS Excel. Is Zoe present?
Judy, this is Mike D'Antonio. I'll be giving comments.
Oh, thank you. For Excel SPS.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Presiding Officer Hamer, thank you for the opportunity to comment on this important rulemaking. SPS will let its written comments speak for themselves, and therefore we won't repeat it. I'll be repeating them here. As noted in our comments, SPS has many concerns on the proposed rule as currently drafted and believes that a robust workshop process is critically important in drafting this new rule. SPS looks forward to working with commission staff and other stakeholders in this and future workshops to address the concerns of all to ultimately achieve a balanced rule that benefits both customers and utility, is also compliant with the law. Based on this workshop, we likely will have more comments, but that concludes my comments for this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, this is Arthur, and I appreciate SPS's initial filing in that you provided essentially kind of like red line versions of our proposed rule, and
Right.
that's certainly one way to do it. We encourage you to also think about how we can make this work, right? And proposals that fit within the overall construct that work. You know, I know that SPS has certain specific and unique circumstances, and as in the other rulemakings, we're trying to accommodate those while meeting New Mexico's particular resource needs. So I would just encourage the utility to come back with proposals for positive ways that we can make this change beneficial.
Great. Okay. We'll try to do our best, Arthur.
Somebody told me that I effectively use guilt, and I tried not to guilt you on that one.
Thank you.
Yes, guilt is an effective motivator. Next, we have 3 people signed up from PNM, and if possible, could one of them speak on behalf of PNM? Steve Schwepke, Leslie Padilla, and Nick Phillips.
Thank you, Ms. Amer. Yes, this is Leslie Padilla. I represent Public Service Company of New Mexico. Steve Schwebke is with us. He is a regulatory case manager, and Nick Phillips is PNM's Director of Resource Planning. PNM did submit comments last Friday. The gist of those comments was that since there had been relatively little time to respond to such an extensive rewrite of the IRP rule, we provided only preliminary comments at a fairly high level, and they were primarily focused on the legal issues that we see with the rule. We do appreciate, well, actually, I wanted to thank Commission staff first, and Commissioners Fishman and Hall for their efforts to improve the Commission's IRP rule, and prior to that, the new procurement rule that had been under consideration. And thank you to Commission staff for working so hard to prepare this draft rule. Since the IRP statute, which was passed by the legislature as part of the Efficient Use of Energy Act, was passed in 1994, was it 2004? Sorry, 2004, I believe. I might be getting it wrong. PNM, has prepared and filed integrated resource plans with a robust public participation. So we, and if anyone has reviewed our most recent IRP, it should be evident that to a great extent, PNM is already taking into account the important legislative changes that that have been noted, that Mr. O'Donnell noted in this meeting. The Energy Transition Act, of course, the Grid Modernization Act. Having recently worked on PNM's transportation electrification case, I also know that our current IRP took transportation electrification into account, as well as we consider what future needs on PNM's system will be. So we appreciate that the Commission wants to, change the IRP or improve it to make sure that utilities are taking into account these important state policy goals. And I think PNM is already doing that. I did want to focus first, though, on the serious legal questions that we think the rule raises. And these are not only due to the fact that the proposed rule now marries the procurement considerations that were part of the prior rulemaking to the IRP, but there are some new legal issues as well as PNM sees it. And before I describe those legal issues, I just want to go ahead and expressly ask the Commission to require legal briefing on these important questions as a threshold matter before we do any more work on the rule, because it would be a shame to spend a lot of time working on these very detailed and challenging issues if the direction that the rule is going in is really not supported by the law. And in PNM's opinion, as outlined in the comments that we filed on Friday, there are some serious legal issues with the rule. I would start with the Commission's the IRP statute, part of the EUEA, as I mentioned. That gives fairly limited authority to the Commission on an IRP rule. As the Commission itself acknowledged in its order in January of 2018, I believe, the last time the IRP rule was revised, the IRP rule is primarily a filing requirement. That doesn't mean utilities don't take integrated resource planning seriously, but the statute envisions the IRP as a planning exercise. So that would be an important threshold issue to get clear on before we go down a path where that might ultimately be subject to legal challenge. As our comments that we submitted on Friday also outline, we think that the rule, the proposed rule, may impermissibly involve the Commission into matters that are really exclusively within the utilities prerogative, management type questions. As we had explained in our prior comments in the procurement rulemaking, we're concerned about the takings implications of certain portions of the rule that would require utilities to make its own property and facilities available to third parties. That issue was never resolved in the procurement rulemaking, and it's presented here in the IRP rulemaking with I think very little change from what was in the prior rulemaking. SPS has raised some other legal concerns, those of due process and implications on multi-jurisdictional utilities. Staff has also raised legal issues, that is the implications of the Commission involving itself in an RFP. So again, we would appeal to the Commission to allow legal briefing on these questions so that we can actually get resolution before spending more time and effort when the rule itself might ultimately be subject to legal challenge. Let's see, I think we'll leave it there. I actually just had a couple of questions, and they go to my point about the Commission's fairly recent decision when it revised the IRP recently, and that is about the rebuttable presumption. And I don't know if someone can speak to that, but wondering why we would introduce that back into the rule when it was removed only 3 years ago with the Commission's acknowledgement of the IRP as a planning tool.
Can
think that's all I have. Really do appreciate this. We will of course participate in any comments and workshops that the commission allows, but we again would like, before that takes place, an opportunity to try to resolve some of these legal issues. Thank you so much. Oh, I actually did have one quick, no, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for the comments, Leslie, and thank you for the question on the rebuttable presumption. I'd like to take it first, and then if there's anything I'm missing, Robert or Arthur, would you please follow up?
Colin, I was going to take that question.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
Or Arthur can as well, but
Yeah, even better for the commissioner to do it.
Yeah, I think I've got
I apologize.
more history than you guys with it. You know, actually, Leslie, I had supported getting rid of the rebuttable presumption at the time when we did get rid of it. But thereafter, and as we have been working on developing a new rule, I see value in it. So we stuck it back in. It seemed like a step that could provide some expediency and motivation for utilities. So it just looked like maybe a good tool in the toolbox, but it was, I mean, everything that we have written down in that rule is something that we'd like to hear people discuss and tell us their views. I mean, we anticipated people say, what are you doing this for? You just took it out. Now you want it back in. What are you doing? But the fact is, we just gave it more thought. And we were trying to create an entire different context than the rule was before. Yeah, it was just kind of a check the box exercise the way we had last rendered it. But frankly, we just wanted to use the rule in a meaningful way and have it have a shortened time frame and be able to incorporate into it the policy requirements, and they were just modernize it. And I do want to say, I definitely see a dramatic change in the IRPs, in PNM's IRP. And so I totally agree with you. PNM is already they seem to already have an approach that seems very close to what we're trying to achieve here. And we would love to hear you guys, give your viewpoint. I would like to understand, your views about whether or not you think the rebuttable presumption is something useful or not. So, I mean, definitely, we take seriously what you have to say about legal issues. But those actually are things we could even discuss within the context of the rulemaking workshop process itself. I mean, that's why we want to do workshops, so we can just talk among ourselves about what's the best solution to whatever problems we're all identifying. So I hope that answers your question. And if you have something to tell us that you think should be different about it, we want to hear it.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Hall. And yes, we did not yet have a chance to review the rule. And I think the review today that Mr. Gillespie and Mr. Lundin provided is very helpful in helping our folks understand the changes that it would make. And we do intend to give you more of a blow by blow of our reactions to the rule and possibly any means by which we might improve it or suggest changes to it.
Well, great. I appreciate it. And, I anyhow apologize for the short turnaround time. I think we were just getting, we're just feeling the pressure of getting this started because we've been talking about it for so long and we really wanted to get this out in front of people. But then, as you know, we have a lot of other things going on at PRC. And so I think we were just, trying maybe too hard. But we definitely welcome the idea of doing more workshops. It's fine. And so we'll just take the time and do it right.
If I may ask a question, if nobody else had something to add to that.
Sure.
Leslie, in reviewing PNM's filing and from the other utilities as well, there were a lot of citations to court cases that say that the commission should not be substituting its judgment for essentially the utilities board of directors. So I'm relatively new in New Mexico. To your knowledge, does the PNM board of directors actively vet and approve the IRP before it's filed with the commission?
Mr. O'Donnell, I do not know the specific answer to that question, but the legal issue is a little more general than that in terms of the commission being able to make what are properly the utilities decisions, whether it's the board of directors of a utility making those decisions or managers. I don't think that should be a distinction.
Okay, I'll just ask you to, when you're reviewing the changes that we've made, to look at the places where the commission actually makes a decision. And that is essentially on the statement of need and the action plan, which is not demonstrably different than what the existing process is, except that it leads to procurement. Okay, and then the commission would review RFP documents, but not approve them. We don't have a formalized approval process for that. So I'll just ask you to look at more closely at that, and maybe we can reach an accommodation.
Thank you. We will.
Great. Thank you, Laura.
If I may, could I also follow up on the rebuttable presumption briefly?
Yeah, Colin, could you put your mic a little closer to your mouth?
Yes. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah, following up on Commissioner Hall's answer, one of the other goals of the proposed rule is to increase transparency in sort of a front-loaded process. And if everything lines up with the statement of need, then the CCN would almost naturally flow from that. And that was one of the considerations in reinserting that rebuttable presumption.
Any other comments on this issue?
So Judy, I just wanted to comment on the legal issue as well. I think something we all have to wrangle with, and I'm no lawyer, so lawyers jump in and shut me up if I get way off track here. But following up on Arthur's point, I think the intention here is not to make decisions for the utility at the commission. I think the intention here is to get all the parties talking up front so that we resolve the issues early on in the process instead of running into all kinds of issues at the back end. And, I think as we put this together, I think we all need to be mindful of that. So the commission intention is not to make decisions for the utility here. It's to be sure that we have a process that everyone's talked, and before the utility makes its decision on a direction, that it knows where all the stakeholders are on it. And that's how we avoid problems down the road. So that's my only comment there.
Okay. With that, I'll go to the next on the list, which is Alice Heathcote of Contour Global. If Alice would like to say anything. I'm not sure I even see her present. Next, I have Adele Lee and Austin Jensen from Holland and Hart. Are either present and would like to make a comment?
Good morning or afternoon, Ms. Amer. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Austin
Good afternoon.
Jensen.
Yes. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm here on behalf of the New Mexico Large Consumer Group, and we appreciate this process and the explanation today, and hopefully the stakeholder process to follow. I had two brief comments, setting aside the legal issues that Ms. Padilla just raised, and if the commission goes that route to do legal briefing before we get into the meat of this rule. We reviewed it, and like Ms. Padilla's last comment, we haven't quite developed granular changes or issues with the rule. But from a macro level, it appears as though the commission made a concerted effort to implement a holistic process to resource procurement. And something to noodle on possibly is how that might impact the PPA approval process, and whether that's something we should consider in this proceeding. So that's my first comment. And the second is, when I was reviewing the rules, I understood it as the consensus process around a statement of need results in one of two things. The first being an expedited treatment, or the second being fully litigated case. An expedited treatment would result if there's full consensus or some 3/4 compromise. And something I'd like to tee up to the commission is whether there's a middle ground if that 3/4 compromise is met. Understanding that we have a concern with holdouts or obstructionists, it seems to me that full agreement and partial agreement shouldn't be treated on the same basis. So with those two comments, that's all I have today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting.
I will make a quick comment is that we had a discussion, we were putting the rule together. I happened to be in on that particular one. I wasn't in on that many of them, but on that one I was. And we did talk about the idea of consensus versus unanimous approval. And your comments are well taken.
Could I ask Mr. Jensen to just clarify what he sees as a possible difficulty with the existing PPA process? I think that what we had in mind was essentially once the resource portfolio comes back to the commission, that the utility just uses the existing processes for approval of contracts.
And Mr. O'Donnell, my comments weren't specific to the PPA in noticing an issue with those rules. And to be frank, I'd have to go and look and see if I do have any issues, but I don't think I do. My comment was mainly geared toward whether when you have an IRP process, an RFP process, and a PPA process, and the utility has to follow all three, should we be considering all three in one proceeding to make sure nothing is left out and everything is considered?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next on the list is Pat O'Connell from Western Resource Advocates. Is Pat there?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm here, and thank you for the opportunity to comment on this rulemaking process. I, like many, find myself in a position where I haven't had a lot of time to dive into the draft rule. And so I just going to offer a few high-level observations. There's been a lot of comments written and said already today about make sure you give this process the time and space it needs to do it well. I think in the spirit of integrated resource planning, I wholeheartedly agree with that. So glad to hear that you're open to more workshops. The big thing I was concerned about when I read the draft rules, it kind of felt like there's a lot in there that are reactions to things that have just happened. And I also am afraid that it's short circuiting and making the planning process too short-sighted. So, there's been a lot that's happened in the last couple of years related to retirement of old facilities. More than one utility is facing that. And so I don't think that the things that have happened in the last couple of years, especially if you think about what Commissioner Hall said, we also had a new law show up as part of that. So trying to fix all the things that you felt like were issues over the last couple of years, I don't think is a proactive perspective. I think there are some things that have sorted out. I think there are some things that will be different forever. And I think taking a step back, sorting through what you are uncomfortable with that has confronted you in the last couple of years, and getting down to identifying which of these things will endure in the future and which of these things are relics of the past would be very valuable right now when you're looking at this rule. And then the biggest thing that I was worried about with the planning process being short-sighted was, for some reason, you shortened the planning horizon to 10 years. There are targets in the law for renewable portfolio standards and for zero carbon goals that are not too far away from 20 years from now. It's important that we use this integrated resource planning process to look all the way through to the end. Because if we don't now take advantage of the fact we have 15, 10, 20 years to do some of the things we do, we're increasing the odds that we're going to make bad choices. So that's just an example of the kind of thing where I think this draft rule is at odds with what the goals you've stated are for this process. And then one more thing just to follow on, we've talked a little bit about this stakeholder process. I would offer up that just this whole concept of a consensus by a supermajority is very much at odds with the idea of, in order to address environmental justice concerns, that we need to bring new people to the table. So having a thing where, and it's very not defined here, how that supermajority is identified, who does it? Is it the facilitator? Is it the commission? But then just selecting a group of people and saying they're right, everybody, this minority group is wrong, is potentially very dangerous and counter to the concept of trying to move forward in a just and equitable way. So glad to hear there's going to be more workshops. Glad to hear there will be more process. I would say, in addition to looking at the comments you've already received, I'd encourage you to take a step back. I mean, you've obviously invested a lot, done a lot of work to get to this point, but it would be worth it to assess what we're hearing and what I've heard are the noble goals of this process versus what some of the outcomes that are embedded in this draft rule would be.
Pat, may I ask a question of you?
Certainly.
Yeah. So you're talking about this supermajority and then potentially, people get left out. I'd have the same concern when we go through a docket, I would say specifically rate cases, and there's a stipulated agreement and not all parties sign on to the stipulation. And, I always have a little bit of heartburn about, is this the rest of the group beating up on this one group that didn't sign on to the stipulation? We certainly haven't solved that. And I'm wondering if you see a different dynamic going on here in this planning process than you do in what we already do with considering stipulations.
Yeah, clearly there's a different dynamic. This is a planning process. So we're trying to look ahead as far in the future as possible. I've heard, you and Arthur talk about, hey, look at the decision points for the commission in this. That's no different than what we had before. And what you're trying to do is get the planning process, the information on the table before the decisions actually happen. When you get to a stipulation on a rate case, I would submit that is what we're trusting you to do as a commissioner, to weigh the evidence and the facts and circumstances of each case. And so that's a very different dynamic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, unless there are any further follow-up questions, the next person on the list is Carrie Olson from Montgomery and Andrews. Is Carrie Olson present? Does not appear to be. The next person on the list is Joan Drake from Interwest Energy Alliance.
Hey, Judy, I'm sorry for interrupting. This is Nancy Burns. Sorry, Joan.
No worries. That's okay.
Yeah, I was having a problem turning off my mute button. Carrie's busy doing something else today, so I'm here for El Paso Electric Company, Judy.
Oh, okay. Well then, I was going to call on you, and now you can take the floor, Nancy.
Okay. Did I jump my position in line? Because I can wait.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Nancy Burns, and I'm here representing El Paso Electric Company today. And, we filed initial comments in this proceeding. We also raised some legal issues, particularly with the procurement piece of the proposed rule. And basically all I did was take comments that we had filed in the commission's docket 1830. We had filed a legal memo in support of comments. And so those issues, the way I've initially gone through the draft rule, it's our position that a lot of those legal issues still exist. So we too support further workshops. If any legal briefing is required or requested, we'd be happy to participate in that. Commissioner Fishman, regarding your comment on and the dialogue that's been going on with the supermajority and actions that would replace utility actions, I think that supermajority provision of the IRP rule is a really good example, because the way that that's currently written, it might not even be the commission or the utility that makes that decision. So that's sort of like a third party or third parties that may have that decision. So I think there are a lot of other issues with just the IRP section of the rule as it's drafted. I do have several questions. I don't know if you just want to get through all the comments and see if there's time for questions, or how you want to handle that, Judy.
I'm going to go through the list, and then we can, maybe go back through it if there are people who want to say something else.
Okay, so I'll just give a few more comments. EP is totally committed to working through this process. We think there's a lot of room for improvement in the IRP process. We are open to the idea of shortening the IRP process. We've had a lot of frustration with the public process, not really a lot of effort has gone into it. I do have some questions about what approval of the portfolio on the back end, mean in terms of the other approvals, like the gentleman from Holland and Hart. There's also like the CCN proceeding that comes after the IRP proceeding. So those are just essentially our initial comments, and we'll have a more detailed review of the rule on July 15th.
Great. Thanks very much, Nancy.
Good, thank you.
Any other comments to Nancy's comments? If not, I'll go to the next person on the list, which is Joseph Yar and/or Shauna Tilburg.
Did we skip Joan Drake?
Oh, poor Joan. Joan, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm feeling abused here, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, you were so nice to let Nancy go first and then just skip over you. Sorry.
Okay, well, no worries, no worries. I'm fine. So I represent Interwest Energy Alliance on this, and we did provide written comments. Thank you for providing opportunities for us to do that and this workshop. We really love the workshop opportunities as well. We've provided substantial comments over the years in the prior rulemakings and in this current one. So I'm not going to go through those again. You've got all those. They're extensive. This is obviously a big concern for Interwest. Our members are many of the bidders in these competitive processes. They compete against each other and others. What we're concerned about is a competitive, fair, transparent process. That's what we'd like to see for everyone. So instead of comments, I've got 3 questions for you, and I'm not expecting answers or even a debate on this right now, but I do want to pose 3 questions that I think are important and we'd like you to be thinking about as we go forward. So the first of these is we understand that the statute and the old and the new rules are oriented towards generation resource planning. But we think that there's an important question here in that what role does transmission play in this? And what we've seen is that transmission can be a major constraint on generation. And even in terms of the IRP, where we're not looking at specific resources, but types of resources, transmission can still play a huge role in that. And it gets ignored or left out, and or it gets buried. And as Commissioner Fishman has noted, we don't figure it out until the end of the process instead of the beginning. So I would note that we think transmission and its role in this process should not be ignored. And I think this group needs to think about that a little bit more, and we will be too. But in terms of future iterations of this rule, I'd like everybody to be thinking about that. The second question or issue I wanted to bring up is this rebuttable presumption. And I don't want to debate its value or not at this point. We appreciate that it's back in and that the intent is to make the IRP process a little more substantive and meaningful and not just to check the box. However, the concern I have is for how long does this rebuttable presumption apply? Is it the 4 years of the action plan? Is it 3 years? Is it the 10 years of the whole planning process? I see that as a concern, especially since we have seen such fast evolving technologies and economics as well. And so within a few years, we could see these conclusions in an IRP being out of date. So that's something else for, I think, for all of us to be thinking about as we go forward in this. Thirdly and lastly, we are concerned about what we see as the rather lukewarm response in the proposed rule to previous input on the importance of an independent evaluator in the procurement process. And so the question I would pose to all of you is, do you see potential for a stronger role or stronger provision in the rule for a stronger IE role? And are you looking for parties? Are you looking to us to flesh that out for you? Or do you want to kind of take these comments in general and then take the pen yourselves and flesh those out? What are you looking for from us on that? It's a serious concern, I think, for Interwest. We've given you lots of input on that in the prior procurement cases, including some examples from other states where this has worked. It's been applied. It works. It works well. So with that, I will conclude and ask for any feedback, or we can go forward to the next commenter. Thank you for letting us speak.
Well, Joan, thank you for your comments. And we're in a state of indecision about how far the role of an independent evaluator should reach. So, we look forward to having that discussion further. Yes, you've given us lots of comments. I remember that. And that's very useful. There were some elements of this rule that we thought maybe made it not as necessary to have such extended scrutiny because we thought we would be achieving more transparency, I think is why we thought that may not at all even be necessary. But we didn't want to drop it all together because we thought there may be opportunities where it would be very useful. So I would like to ask you to think about that process that we went through that involved having a lot more scrutiny and transparency into the procurement process from beginning to end. So it almost made it seem like the evaluator wasn't necessary. So, but please read it and think some more thoughts so we can discuss that, because we really do want to know what you guys think. We don't want to just have you tell us some comments and then take up the pen on our own. We really don't want to be doing that anymore. So I really do appreciate that, you guys are piping up with real questions.
Thanks.
Cynthia, can I?
Yes, please, Steve, do.
Yeah, and one thing that's been going through my mind as I look at it is the difference between an independent monitor and an independent evaluator.
Yeah.
And, a monitor being someone who makes sure the process goes fairly and smoothly, as opposed to an evaluator who might make a recommendation. And in my head, what I'm wrestling with is we get plenty of opinions about what should be right. Would an evaluator opinion really help in deciding any of this? Or is it really a monitor that we want? And I'd certainly love to hear opinions on that and why one is preferable or not to the other, and how that might work. So that's that.
And commissioners, may I follow on that question
Sure.
as well of the independent monitor? Joan, we did spend a lot of time looking at the comments from the 1830 case. There were tons of comments from multiple parties regarding whether or not it should be an evaluator or a monitor, how that evaluator or monitor would be compensated, where they would be housed, how they would be insulated, from potential biases, and there were just so many complex questions that we decided it would be best to solicit this process and try to farm it out to the members of the workshop. So we would definitely really appreciate any proposals and comments to that effect.
Understood. Thanks.
Next on the list, as I stated, was Joseph Yar and Shauna Tilburg from the Yar Law Firm. If either are present, I'm not seeing them. Next, from the city of Las Cruces, Anastasia Stevens and Lisa LaRoque are either present to make a comment.
Hi there, it's Anastasia Stevens, I'm Regulatory Counsel.
Oh, and yes, and it sounded like, is this Joseph Yar?
Oh.
Yes, this is Joseph Yar. Sorry,
Okay,
I just had a.
I'm sorry, Anastasia.
I'll be happy to shut up. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get to you right after Joseph. Go ahead, Joseph.
I won't take too much. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Joseph Yar. I'm here on behalf of Onward Energy. Very much like what was mentioned previously, we participated extensively in the previous hearings and cases, and we have filed numerous comments on it. I don't want to rehash any of those. I think a lot of the questions that were raised by many of the commenters that went before me are some of the questions that we would also raise here. And, you know, we look forward to having the opportunity to file comments. I believe it's on July 22nd. The one question that I haven't heard, and I would like to see if there's any consensus or direction from the commission, is the future of these workshops. I understand that there's going to be another round in July, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of procedural on responses on how to file our comments. Are we just filing our initial comments? Are we filing responses to the comments that have already been filed last Friday? I think it'd be a good idea if we could kind of, at this point, kind of set out parameters on how we move forward. But that's the only comment that I have at this point.
Thank you. The only thing I can comment to that, Joseph, is that the second workshop was scheduled for July 22nd, and comments arising out of this workshop and in preparation for the second workshop are due on July 15th. And I don't know if you got that order. That was last Wednesday.
Thank you, Judy. So if I understand correctly, the commission is expecting parties, stakeholders to file responses to those comments that were filed Friday plus their comments. Is that correct?
Right. I would say if you haven't filed an initial comment, that could be a combination initial and response comment. Initial for someone that hasn't yet filed comments, and then perhaps responding to what others have said either here or through writing.
And
okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. And
so Judy, I'd like to jump in there too, just to let Joe know. Can you hear me? All right, Joe. Joseph Yar, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. So, unlike in the interconnection rule, we didn't start out with a series of workshops already laid out, but we're sort of taking it one workshop at a time, in a way, unless in the next workshop we all conclude that we need a series of workshops. But you know, we definitely want to be responsive to anybody who feels that they haven't been heard and that there needs to be more discussion. We want to be responsive to that. We want to really do this right. So, you know, I'm sorry for what might appear to be a lack of clarity there. We had, you know, thought we'd start with one workshop and see what develops. But what developed right away was the need for a second workshop. And I'm fine with that. I'm glad to do it. So if you have thoughts about how you think a structure would be for workshops going forward, I'd like to know that too. We're completely open about how to interact with folks. We just want it to be the most productive as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Now we can go back to Anastasia Stevens on behalf of the City of Las Cruces.
Thank you, Judy. This is Anastasia Stevens. I'm the regulatory attorney for the City of Las Cruces. And as most of you know, the city and its residents are El Paso Electric Company customers. What you may not know is that we are approaching the end of the EPE's 2021 IRP process. And but we're not at the end. So we still haven't had internally the opportunity to discuss the proposed rule in the context of what we've learned going through the process for the last slightly more than a year, just about a year. I think we got a little bit of a late start because of COVID this time. But we hope to do so in future steps in this rulemaking workshop process. So I'll start by saying that the city strongly agrees with Pat O'Connell about questioning whether the time frame should be reduced to 10 years from 20, and perhaps it should be extended all the way out to past 2048 to encompass the entirety of the effects of the amendments to the Renewable Energy Act. In case number 19349 UT, last December, the commission rejected El Paso Electric's proposal to build a gas generating plant and explicitly ordered the company to present in any new resource acquisition case that it files a comprehensive plan covering that entire period. We'd suggest that you consider, at least for the first cycle here, extending that kind of a requirement to all the utilities. To do otherwise, I think, risks the possibility of short-sighted, not necessarily short-term, but short-sighted decisions, because many certainly generating plants and also PPAs have a term that extends through that long period. So we hope again that will be given some consideration. The city also agrees with Joan Drake's comments about transmission being an important component of this. We're the ratepayers, and we end up paying for that transmission if it's not evaluated in the context of the IRP, if it's not evaluated in the context of the RFP, and then the subsequent proposal to approve generating facilities, or I should say resources. It's going to come back and bite us. And as we've just gone through a general rate case, we also see that transmission is one of those things. Transmission distribution costs just get lost in the wash in a general rate case. And it can be a very, very big numbers. We're truly fearful of some of the big numbers that we will be seeing based on even the projects that were approved by the commission in the LTPPA case 19348 UT last year. But again, it's part of the comprehensive picture. Transmission does need to be considered. Going to more general comments in response to the utilities concerns, mostly legal concerns. I've been a regulatory lawyer for a long time, more than I'm going to tell anybody here, and I'm cognizant of the concerns that they have about the commission's legal authority to require certain processes and things and what they call, the management prerogative. I have two answers to that. First of all, one possibility would be for the commission to take a carrot and stick approach with the options that it considers most important, and perhaps offer the utilities the choice of different tracks with perhaps expedited treatment under one track rather than the other, or different presumptions under one track or the other. Haven't thought that one through thoroughly, but I think it's worth consideration in the future. But I would also point out that the essential corollary of management prerogative is that the management is exposed to future decisions about prudence, and that the commission has to have the courage of its convictions and make prudence disallowances when management has made the wrong choices. Finally, again, coming close to home with El Paso Electric are the multi-jurisdictional issues that El Paso Electric and Southwestern Public Service have raised in their comments, both orally and written. I think it should be self-evident that utilities, some of these utilities had been operating in multiple jurisdictions for 100 years or more. And it's not exactly news that one of management's obligations is to comply with the law in both jurisdictions and to achieve cost-effective and legal results in both jurisdictions. So I think that the multi-jurisdictional claims that they've read, which seem to be implying that the Commission's jurisdiction over those utilities is lower than its jurisdiction over, say, PNM that operates only in the state, is a complete red herring. With that, I'll just say we do appreciate the opportunity to participate. We hope that we'll have some more time to participate because we are scheduled for an EPE hearing at the workshop of the day of the workshop on the 22nd of July. So I'll have to put it in writing. And thank you very much.
Anastasia, I wanted to make a comment on prudence. And actually, when there's a disallowance of recovery on an asset because of imprudence, I consider that a failure on the part of everybody, not just the utility, but the regulators as well. I mean, it's our job to do a good job, of approving investments in the first place. And one of the things I'd like to see come out of this process, quite honestly, is that because of the upfront work done, that you would see fewer opportunities to question prudence because we did a better job up front. And I would see that as one of the goals that I would like to achieve as part of this process.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Michael Keegan from PNM, but PNM spoke.
Judy, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. I had trouble getting myself unmuted, but I wanted to thank Anastasia, and I was particularly interested in her describing a conflict she has. Did we schedule our next conference? Well, I mean, our next workshop at a time when a hearing is going on. And when I think about that, hearings are going on almost continuously now until mid-September. So maybe that's a problem.
Commissioner Hall, that's absolutely true. And as of now, El Paso Electric, we have 3 hearings scheduled. The first, second, different hearings in different cases for the first, second, and third weeks of July. And there is one that's scheduled on the 21st and 22nd. That is the hearing in case 21-00064 UT on the February 2021 fuel adjustment clause, which the commissioners, as well as certainly I'll be there, and I don't know whether either or both or other commissioners may wish to be present as well. And that's in front of hearing examiner Carolyn Glick.
Huh. Well, thank you for telling me. I don't know how closely we looked at the ongoing calendar or otherwise, but I think we've got that date set. I'm not trying to suggest we change it necessarily, Judy, but I think, to the extent we have people participating, we probably need to maybe do some polling of availability later on, or I don't know what the solution is, but maybe there is no solution, but I wanted to address that, what sounded like a concern. Do you have any thoughts, Judy, about that?
We could postpone it, and that'll be something that the commissioners could consider. Try to find another date if you would like, but at this point, that's the date unless the commission chooses to change it. And so that would be a commission's choice.
I guess we'll just have to talk about it among ourselves and see if it's a problem we can fix.
Yes, and
Ms. Amer?
Yes, who is?
It's Leslie Padilla from PNM. I don't know if you were done in your discussion with Commissioner Hall, but I did, since you mentioned Michael Keegan's name, I did realize a little earlier that I had failed to introduce him when I spoke. Michael Keegan is outside counsel for PNM with Wilkinson, Barker, and Nauer, so he's joining us just to assist P&M on the legal questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that addition. It appears that last on the list, but not least for certain, is the utility division staff. Brad Borman and David Black are here, and John Reynolds. And I see David Black, and I do not know if he is going to be speaking on behalf of the utility division, or whether it would be John or Brad. Maybe you can fill me in, David.
Can you hear me?
Not very well.
Oh. Let's try this other.
How about now?
Good.
That's much better.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
Let me see. As you know, the
Oh, now you have two of them on, so you're going to have to fix that.
All right, hold on. Is it off?
Yes, it appears. No, it sounds like
No,
you
it's still there.
Still have two.
Need the one with the picture. All right.
I'm not used to using my phone. Okay, I'm gonna leave, and then I appear now as David B. Santa Fe.
Yeah, that sounds like there's just one of you now.
Okay, great. As you know, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this conference. I was unaware that staff had signed up to make comment, but in any event, staff stands by its file.
No, David, you had signed up.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, then I apologize for I have forgotten.
okay.
Staff stands by its filed comments. The legislature is presumed, in addition to that, I would like to state that the legislature is presumed to know the existing law at the time that new legislation is created. The legislature was engaged in a comprehensive amount of legislation when it created the Energy Transition Act and changes to the Renewable Energy Act. The legislature did not make changes to the Integrated Resources Act. From that, staff believes that the legislature, who is presumed to know the existing law that is in place, did not believe that changes to the IRP law was called for. As such, staff is of the opinion that the IRP is a planning tool as contained in NMPRC precedent in case number 17-00198-UT, the last IRP rulemaking docket of the commission. I'll just, if the division director would like to step up. Also, I believe that perhaps staff, the acting engineering bureau chief is on, or was intending to be on, Mr. Jack Sidler. Or if Brad needs to make any statements, but that's the end of my comment, or staff's comment, excuse me.
Well, thank you very much, David. And I don't know if anyone else from the utility division, Jack Sidler, I see. I don't see John Reynolds, and I don't see Brad, but Jack.
No, I don't have anything to add to what David said. I think David did a very good job of stating where we stand.
Well, thank you very much for your comment. I want to go back to Peter Gould. I don't know if he's here. I called him in the beginning. I'll ask him to unmute, but he appears to be mute. So with that, I've gone through the entire list, and I would hand it back to Commissioners Hall and Fishman to just do a conclusory statement, rounding out, what we've heard and where we're headed.
Judy, did we, didn't Nancy Burns have some things she wanted to go through if we were
Oh.
a little early?
Nancy. would
Nancy
you-
has questions.
I actually don't. Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I'm here, and I do have some questions. I know it's after 4, so I don't want to take up a lot of people's time. But one of the questions or points that I want to raise, sort of along the lines that Joan Drake rose, I think that the confidentiality provision of the rule may need to be addressed. It might serve the commission, staff, and the parties if some sort of standard form of protective order was actually issued that would facilitate the information that could be requested in these proceedings. We have a long history with protective orders, and it just might expedite things if we had a standard form of order that was on the books that people could sign non-disclosure agreements with. And I wondered along that line if anyone else had any issues with the utility identifying what's confidential in the RFPs. I think that's kind of backward, and maybe we could have some more discussion on that particular issue. I have other questions. I could stop now if anyone has comments.
No, go on.
Yeah, another question that I have, and I guess it's kind of a legal question, is what is it in these new statutes that staff and the parties think may tie the IRP directly into the procurement process? And I know there's been a lot of new statutory requirements that need to be addressed. I just personally, I don't see that direct tie-in. And I also don't see any sort of like scale of need that's established.
Scale of what?
Need. When
N-E-E-D.
N-E-E-D, need.
Need.
Yeah, need. When Art was going over the outline, which I did think was very helpful, the materials were very helpful. He said that we're going to be, addressing a new kind of need and sort of ranking the different types of resources. And so, in my mind, just having a list of all these resources with all these different statutes, I'm wondering, where does that ranking come from? Like, how are those ranked? I don't see any statute that ranks different levels, those different levels of need. And then another question that I have is, this whole idea of, rather than fighting about the inputs, the forecasts and the inputs that go into these models, we're going to approve an output. I think I heard a couple of the staff people talking about, approving an output. And I get the purpose of that approval is perhaps prima facie evidence to use in a resource procurement case. That happened in the past. It really hasn't happened recently. But I'm wondering, like, what if any other meaning does that approval have? So I just have a bunch of questions, and we can talk about them more as the workshops continue and as we file comments.
Those are really good questions, Nancy. I really, really appreciate it. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah, I know it is kind of like 4:15 here now, and we could talk for a couple hours probably on what you just brought up. But I love it. I mean, that's just what we want to hear from you, because from people is, what does this even mean? Does this make sense this way? Will it be beneficial? Is it legal? We struggled with those issues ourselves, and we just have to put something down to get out to folks and say, well, what do you think? So That's very interesting. And I guess we shouldn't try to launch. I mean, I could, if I start talking back to you on some of these subjects, it's going to take too long, but I want to do it.
I have one more question. I have one more question. Is the commission, and I'm just not sure about this, is the commission going to be in a new facility where people can actually meet in person? Or is that still sort of in the future?
No, it's pretty soon. I don't know the exact date. Judy or Steve or somebody might know, but we're supposed to move into the Bochum building this month, I thought. Is that right, Steve?
I do know that in July, the move, and starting actually next week into July, the moving out of the storage into the new building is happening. As to how long that will take and when people will actually be sitting in that building, I don't have a definite answer, but.
So we'll be on Zoom for a while.
Yeah, this is Arthur, and I'd like to just address Nancy's second point, which is this sense of need, of redefining need. It's already happening, right? We're seeing that the way that electricity is both used by consumers and produced by a number of new technologies is changing the old paradigm of meeting a 1 in 10 summer peak plus a reserve margin, right? That's the way that engineers have traditionally looked at it. And what we're seeing is that within that construct, we have different needs that happen every year, and they're different from the year before. And what we're really trying to do is to give the utilities a broader palette of solutions to the problem that they have, which is how do you meet that need, okay? How do you meet that load? And you can meet it not just by building a resource that's going to live for 25 or 50 years, but by addressing consumption patterns through demand response, improved energy efficiency programs that can take away and shave that peak, through storage technologies that can move power from one time when it's generated, when the sun's shining, to another time when people might actually be consuming more energy, but the sun's not there. All of those things are relatively new in the utility industry, and yet our IRP does not reflect them. Those things are currently considered as inputs to the forecast analysis, and we really want to see them be the outcomes and the solutions that utilities can use at their discretion, right, in order to meet those blips in the system, in order to meet the summer need that you didn't project, in order to meet the different things that we're encountering almost on a daily basis now. So all I can say is that we don't have the answers, but we see a whole new set of solutions on the horizon. And we want to make the utilities understand that they can use those tools, not just build a new gas-fired peaker.
Yeah, I understand. I appreciate that. And I think that that is exactly where we're headed to in the future. And that, if this IRP process, can help get us there. I'm sure there's still a fundamental principle at play here that, the utility still has the obligation of last resort, right? The obligation to serve is there, and that is on the utility. That there's been no fundamental change to that.
No, and I don't believe that there's anything that we're proposing that reduces the focus on reliability and the utilities' responsibility for reliability. We're just trying to give the utilities a broader palette of ways to maintain that reliability.
Could I make a point on that last point of Mr. O'Donnell's? And I actually do think there's some risk introduced by, this is Leslie Padilla from PNM, by the procedure that these complicated procedures that the rule creates that would essentially allow non-utility stakeholders who could well be bidders and folks who are interested in providing, generation resources to utilities to basically make decisions. And that goes to what I should have responded to earlier when Commissioner Fishman, I think it was either Commissioner Fishman or Mr. O'Donnell or both, who asked about specific concerns with the rule in terms of probably inappropriately interfering with utility management prerogatives. That is one of them, requiring the commission to approve a statement of need that may not be developed by the utility at all. That, and then the requirement to obtain approval of an IRP. As everyone was talking, I was looking at research I had done last year on the procurement rule, and I had found a statute in Utah. Utah actually does require utilities to obtain commission approval of maybe not RFPs, but I forget what resource requests, but they do that pursuant to a statute. We don't have that here. All we have is an IRP statute that is a planning requirement. So there are kind of multiple concerns there. To Ms. Burns' comment about the statutes that the commission is relying on here as authority for the rule, I also wanted to note some additional research I had done in Arizona, where the IRP process is different and more involved, kind of a little more similar to what the proposed rule would establish. But there, a number of statutes similar to, I think, our Renewable Energy Act, they specifically give the commission, the Arizona Public Utility Commission, additional authority related to utility IRPs. That's a difference. And then just one last question. I think I heard Mr. O'Donnell earlier on in the afternoon talk about the next stakeholder process, speaking of other states, about possibly having an opportunity to discuss other state experiences. Did I misunderstand that, or is that in the works?
I don't remember hearing that, but I think it's a great idea. I think that's an excellent idea. We should do that.
And I'll say that we did look at places like Colorado and Arizona for how they're changing their plans, and that went into the construct here. We like New Mexico-based solutions, but we do look at states that are grappling with these same issues to come up with the best ways of doing it. And I'll just say that we don't envision decisions being made without the utility, right? I mean, nothing in this process gives power away from the utility. The utility is still bringing forth its proposals to the commission. And we're just looking for ways for the increasing number of stakeholders to get involved early. And that's really all I can say, is that that's one of the reasons why there would be a commission facilitated process to rein the herd and make sure that that everything is being balanced and comes out with a result, and that there is always this issue that the utility may not agree with everything that's being proposed and could bring to the commission alternatives. So I don't see us giving away anything.
Well, with that, I would go back again to Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Fishman, and if they have any closing comments.
Sure. Do you want to go first, Steve, since I went first at the beginning?
Okay. This was good discussion. There's lots of issues to go through. I think everyone will find us to be good listeners and very flexible in being sure that we're looking at all the concerns that folks have and being thorough about it. Sometimes you never know exactly where these things are going to end up. I will say that personally, I'm very committed to the idea that what we want to do is resolve problems early in the process and up front. We want to avoid surprises. When we plan well up front, we do a better job of actually making all the resources work better together. And I think we save work for everybody down the road. We also make our decisions more bulletproof. And that could be everything from appeals to whether at some point down the road we're suddenly confronted with finding an investment imprudent. Again, we want to make the right decisions, good decisions up front, and create the environment that makes sure we don't miss things. And so that's the primary goal of what we're trying to do here. And I think if we all focus on that, we'll come up with something that works.
I don't have a lot to add to what Steve said. I agree with everything he said. But I do want to say I'm just really appreciating the questions and comments that people have made today. And I guess it's more than that. I just feel a sort of, I don't know, sense of relief or gratitude or something, because I think almost every issue that was brought up was something that we grappled with ourselves. Like, for example, the need for a statute. And you know, where in different points in the rulemaking should we have commission involvement, such as approval or recognition or something. And we did look at other state statutes as well, and talk to other state commissioners as well to try to get ideas about how to achieve what we thought were the right goals and learn from their processes. So I for one would really like to see, you know, at least part of another workshop devoted to discussion of what other states have done and are doing, because I think this is kind of more of a new phenomenon for states to develop IRP processes like this. There aren't that many states, I think, in the country, at least based on a paper I read that was written a couple of years ago, that have kind of a collaborative process throughout the IRP process. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated our discussion today, and I look forward to the next workshop. And if you guys have any other ideas about what you want covered at the next workshop, please let us know. You could email Colin or Arthur or anybody. You could email me and Steve, anybody you want up here on our staff, on our team, to let us know what your issues might be. Are you good with that, Steve and Judy and Art?
Yes, certainly. And I just want to echo what Commissioner Hall said, is that all of the issues that were brought up here were issues that we have considered, and it's really good to hear from the community and all the participants, their thoughts on the exact same issues that we were grappling with, and that we see this as the beginning of a collaborative process to come up with the best IRP rule that we can.
Great. Well said, Judy.
Are we adjourned?
Thanks. Yeah, I think we're adjourned. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Judy, for taking us through everything.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank you.